You step into present-day Manchester's northern quarter as rain falls on ancient stones. The city hums with modern life, but beneath your feet lie the remains of a Roman fort built nearly 2,000 years ago. Tonight, we'll walk through 1,000 years of Manchester nights. From Roman soldiers lighting torches in Mamucium fort to Victorian factory workers collapsing after 16-hour shifts. From Blitz survivors huddling in shelters to ravers dancing until dawn in converted warehouses. Each era brought a different kind of rest, a different way to find peace after the day's struggles. We begin where it all started, in the quiet darkness of ancient Britain, where the first structured nights took shape around flickering flames. Before we settle in, if you enjoy these relaxing journeys into the past, like the video and subscribe for more quiet history evenings. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now let's get comfortable and ease into tonight's journey. The torches cast dancing shadows as Roman soldiers move through their final duties at Mamucium fort. You unbuckle your sword belt and set down your helmet, feeling the weight of another day spent watching the forests beyond the River Medlock. 500 men call this remote outpost home, far from the marble columns and warm baths of Rome. Your barracks smell of wood smoke and wool as you settle into evening routines alongside your fellow soldiers. Some sharpen their weapons by flickering torchlight. Others mend torn clothing or polish armour for tomorrow's duties. The day began before dawn with trumpet calls and formation drills. You marched the perimeter roads, checked the grain stores, and practiced sword work until your arms burned. Every day follows the same pattern here, at this crossroads where two Roman roads meet, but tonight feels different. A merchant caravan arrived this afternoon from Gaul, bringing news from distant provinces. You remember the excitement in the civilian settlement just outside the fort's walls. Children ran alongside the wagons, while women called out greetings in Latin mixed with local British words. The vicus, as you call this growing village, depends on the fort for protection. Families of retired soldiers, traders, and craftsmen have built homes using stones from the nearby river. Their cooking fires still glow through small windows as you watch from the ramparts. Marcus, the soldier in the bunk next to yours, pulls out a wooden tablet and begins scratching letters with his stylus. He writes to his wife in Germania every few nights, saving up enough messages to send with the next courier heading north. His shoulders hunch over the wax tablet as he forms each careful word. You can see the longing in his face as he writes about the British weather and the strange foods the local people bring to trade. The Temple of Mithras sits carved into the hillside below the fort. Earlier today, you watched soldiers descend into its cool darkness for evening prayers. The bull-slaying god offers comfort to men far from home. You've attended the ceremonies yourself, sharing bread and wine with your brothers in arms while oil lamps flicker against painted walls. The altar to Fortuna Conservatrix stands in the Principia, where soldiers leave small offerings, asking the goddess to preserve their lives through another winter. You step outside and listen to the sounds of the night settling over Mamucium. Wind moves through the wooden walkways that connect the stone walls. Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf calls from the forests beyond the cleared land around the fort. The River Medlock flows steadily below, carrying the day's runoff toward the larger rivers that lead eventually to the sea. You know that the sea connects you to Rome, but it feels impossibly distant on nights like this. In the officers' quarters, lamplight glows where the centurions plan tomorrow's assignments. They'll send patrols north, toward the Pennine Hills, and south toward the river crossings. The roads must stay safe for merchants and messengers. Local tribes have been quiet recently, but everyone knows peace can change as quickly as British weather. You remember the tension from earlier this summer when scouts reported unusual movement in the Northern Territories. Your own tablet waits in your pack, blank wax ready for your message home. You think about your father's vineyard outside Rome, the way morning light used to filter through grape leaves while you helped with the harvest. Those memories feel like dreams now. This northern cold seeps into your bones differently than the crisp autumn air of the Mediterranean hills. Other soldiers share wine around a small brazier in the corner of the barracks. They speak quietly about home, about the gods, about women they left behind. One tells a story about hunting boar in the German forests before he joined the legions. Another describes the olive groves of Hispania, the way his grandmother used to cure the fruit with sea salt and herbs. These stories travel from mouth to mouth, keeping distant places alive in this remote corner of Britain. The civilian vicus has grown quiet now. Smoke no longer rises from cooking fires, and the sounds of children playing have faded into sleep. You know families are settling into their own evening routines behind wooden doors and woven shutters. Some are British locals who chose to live under Roman protection. Others are camp followers who've travelled with the legions for years, making temporary homes wherever the army needs them. Roman discipline shapes every hour of your day, but it also creates comfort in this uncertain place. The same trumpet calls that wake you before dawn also mark the changing of the guard, the evening meal, and the settling into sleep. These rhythms connect you to every other Roman fort, from Hadrian's Wall to the deserts of Africa. You are part of something larger than this single outpost, something that spans continents and generations. As you finally lie down on your simple mattress, you can still feel the day's march in your legs and the weight of your sword arm from hours of practice. The torch flames dance lower now, casting shifting shadows on the wooden walls. Tomorrow will bring the same routines, the same vigilance, the same careful watching of roads and forests. But these ancient rhythms of duty and rest would not last forever. Within decades, the legions would receive their final orders to withdraw from Britain. The disciplined voices calling out the watch would fade into silence, and the carefully maintained walls would slowly crumble back into the earth. The stones you helped guard would wait quietly in the ground, ready to serve new purposes for different people in times yet to come. Centuries passed before new voices echoed through these abandoned foundations. You kneel on cold stone as a single candle flickers in the small medieval settlement that slowly grew from Roman ruins. The day's work is finished. You helped repair the thatch on your neighbour's roof while autumn wind pulled at loose straw. Your hands still smell of the dried grass, and your shoulders ache from lifting bundles to the roof beams. The settlement has no grand name that reaches across kingdoms. People simply call it the place by the old stones, where the river bends and the Roman road still shows through spring grass. Your home sits where Roman soldiers once walked their evening rounds. The walls mix old stone with new timber, wattle and daub filling the spaces between. You built it with your own hands using blocks that once formed barracks and bathhouses. The stones remember different voices, different prayers, but they keep the wind out just as well for your family. The single room holds everything you own. A wooden table, 2 stools, straw pallets covered with rough wool blankets, clay pots for storing grain and ale. Today brought the kind of worry that settles deep in your chest. The harvest ended 3 weeks ago, but already you count the grain sacks with careful eyes. Winter stretches long in this northern place, and every family knows the fear of empty stores before spring planting. You remember last year when the Miller family lost their youngest son to the fever that came with the cold months. Death visits these small settlements often, arriving without warning, like wolves from the forest. The other families gather in their own homes now, sharing the same quiet rituals that mark each evening. You can see candlelight through the gaps in wooden shutters, small glows that say, people are safe inside for another night. Earlier, you shared bread and thin ale with your wife and 2 children around your own small flame. The bread was coarse and dark, made from grain you grew yourself in the field beyond the old Roman ditch. Your daughter, barely 7 summers old, helped you bake it this morning, her small hands shaping the dough while you told her about the saints who watch over growing things. Your son, older by 2 winters, spent the day learning to weave baskets from river reeds. His fingers moved clumsily at first, but you remember your own father teaching you the same skill beside the same water. The river Medlock flows as steadily now as it did when Roman cavalry watered their horses at its banks. Some things stay constant while kingdoms rise and fall. Water flows, reeds grow, and children learn the work that keeps families fed. The church bell rang for evening prayers an hour ago, its bronze voice calling across the settlement from the small wooden chapel built where Roman officers once held their meetings. You attended with your neighbours, kneeling on the earthen floor, while Father Benedict spoke Latin words that few truly understand. But the rhythm of prayer brings comfort, even when meaning stays hidden. You whispered your own simple words. Thanks for health, for harvest, for another day without raiders or sickness visiting your door. Now your wife tucks the children into their straw beds, pulling wool blankets up to their chins. She whispers the same prayers her own mother spoke, asking saints to guard their sleep and keep evil spirits from entering dreams. You hear her soft voice through the thin partition that separates the sleeping area from the main room. These gentle words have travelled from mother to daughter for generations, a chain of protection that reaches back through years you cannot count. Outside, the settlement settles into its nightly quiet. You hear the soft lowing of cattle in their pen, the rustle of chickens finding roosts in their wooden coop. Dogs bark occasionally, at sounds only they can detect, then fall silent again. The forest beyond your cleared fields holds its own mysteries, deer picking their way through fallen leaves, owls calling to their mates, perhaps wolves moving on paths older than any human dwelling. Time moves differently here than in the grand courts where kings make their plans. You mark seasons by the work they bring, ploughing, sowing, harvest, the long rest of winter, when families gather close and mend what broke during busier months. Saints' feast days break the year into manageable pieces. St. Michael's Day brought the harvest home. St. Martin's Day will mark the slaughter of animals before winter's hardest months. Christmas lies ahead, like a warm promise in the cold darkness. Your candle burns lower, wax pooling at its base. Soon you will blow out the small flame and join your family in sleep. Tomorrow will bring the same routines, checking on animals, mending tools, preparing for winter's demands. But these simple repetitions create the foundation of safety in an uncertain world. When raiders threaten or disease spreads, families who follow the ancient patterns often survive, while others perish. The wooden shutters rattle slightly in the wind, but the sound brings comfort rather than fear. Your home stands solid, built on Roman foundations that have weathered centuries of storms. The old stones anchor your small world against whatever changes might come. You think about the soldiers who once guarded these same fields, men who also knew the weight of daily responsibility and the relief of evening rest. Faith weaves through everything here like a thread through cloth. Morning prayers, evening gratitude, whispered requests for protection. These create a rhythm that makes hardship bearable. When your neighbour's cow died last month, the whole settlement shared what they could spare. When fever struck the baker's wife, women took turns bringing food and sitting beside her bed. Community and belief worked together to build something stronger than individual families could manage alone. Your wife's voice grows quiet as the children drift towards sleep. Soon the settlement will be truly still, except for the night sounds that belong to this place. Wind through thatch, water over stones, the distant call of creatures that live by different rules than humans. These gentle rhythms of evening and rest have shaped human life for countless generations. But in the centuries ahead, something entirely different would shatter this ancient quiet forever. You feel the ground shake beneath your feet as the first cotton mills begin their relentless thunder. The year is 1780, and Manchester is waking from centuries of quiet sleep. You remember yesterday, when you could still hear birds singing at dawn, when church bells marked the hours instead of factory whistles. But today, something has changed forever. The first cotton mill starts its engines just before sunrise, and the sound travels through your bones like nothing you've ever felt before. The machine never stops. You stand outside your small cottage, the same stones that once sheltered medieval families, and feel the vibration through the soles of your feet. Inside the mill, cotton fibres dance in clouds of white dust while great wheels turn without pause. The owners discovered they can make more money if the machines run day and night, never resting like the seasons used to demand. Workers stumble through the factory gates in shifts, some arriving as others collapse from exhaustion and head home. Your day began at the mill before the sun rose. 16 hours you spent feeding cotton into hungry machines, your ears pounding with the crash and clatter of metal wheels. The overseers walk between the machines with sharp eyes watching for anyone who slows down or makes mistakes. Children as young as 6 work beside you, their small fingers perfect for reaching into tight spaces where cotton gets tangled. You see them sway on their feet as afternoon becomes evening, their eyes red from dust and fatigue. The noise follows you home through narrow streets. Steam hisses from tall brick chimneys that rise like fingers pointing at the grey sky. The sound bounces off stone walls and wooden doors, finding its way into every corner where people try to rest. You remember when evening brought natural quiet, when families could hear each other speak without shouting. Now conversations happen in gestures and close whispers, heads bent together to share words that machines try to steal. Your cottage sits where Roman soldiers once slept peacefully. The same stones that knew centuries of gentle evening rituals now tremble with mechanical rhythm. You try to prepare your simple meal, but the wooden table vibrates under your hands. The clay bowl rattles against the rough surface as you pour thin soup made from turnips and barley. Your children look at you with questions in their tired eyes, too weary to ask why the world sounds so angry now. Smokestacks pierce the sky like dark spears, breathing black clouds that never stop rising. Gas flames burn through the night in the mill windows, casting orange light on streets that used to know only moonlight and candle glow. The air tastes different now, thick with coal dust and cotton fibres that make everyone cough. You remember when you could smell rain coming from miles away, when spring brought the scent of new grass and wildflowers. Now the wind carries chemical smells that burn your nose and make your eyes water. Other families crowd into the narrow streets, all carrying the same exhaustion. You nod to your neighbour, a woman whose hands are stained brown from working with cotton dyes. She holds her youngest child against her shoulder, trying to shield the small ears from the constant mechanical screaming. Her husband works the night shift while she takes the day shift, so they barely see each other, except in passing. Their older children tend themselves, learning to sleep through noise that would have terrified their grandparents. The mills hire anyone with working hands. Families move here from distant villages where life followed the slow rhythm of farming seasons. They arrive hoping for steady wages, but they find a world where sleep becomes impossible, and rest feels like a luxury only rich mill owners can afford. You see new faces every week, country people with wide eyes who haven't yet learned to move with the mechanical beat that now governs every hour. The river Medlock, which once ran clear enough for drinking, now flows dark with dyes and chemicals from the cotton mills. Fish disappear from waters that fed Roman soldiers and medieval families for centuries. The smell rises on warm days, mixing with coal smoke to create air that tastes of progress and poison combined. You remember drinking from this river as a child, but now you carry water from distant wells that haven't yet been touched by mill waste. Night brings no relief from the mechanical symphony. Mills operate through darkness, their windows glowing like angry eyes. The sound carries for miles, reaching into the countryside, where farmers lie awake, wondering what monster has awakened in the old market town. Steam engines breathe and hiss like living creatures, but creatures made of iron and fire instead of flesh and blood. The rhythm becomes part of your heartbeat, so constant that silence would feel strange now. You collapse onto your simple bed, but your ears still ring with the day's assault. The mattress vibrates gently with each turn of machinery that never sleeps. Your body aches from standing beside fast-moving equipment, and your arms are sore from lifting heavy baskets of cotton fibre. Mill dust settles in your lungs with each breath, a reminder that this new world demands payment from human bodies as well as human hours. Cotton thread spins into wealth for mill owners who live in grand houses far from factory noise. They sleep in quiet rooms with thick walls, while workers like you learn to rest inside a constant mechanical storm. Your children will grow up thinking this thunder is normal, never knowing the gentle silence that once settled over Manchester when darkness fell. Manchester has become the first city where silence costs more than most families can pay, where rest must be stolen between the beats of an industrial heart that never stops pounding. But as families like yours search for any corner where sleep might be possible, you discover that the noise was only the beginning of what this new world would demand from human bodies seeking rest. The narrow courts trap you in spaces where breathing becomes a struggle against poisoned air. You collapse onto a thin mattress in a windowless cellar as the great stink from the River Irwell seeps through every crack in the crumbling brick walls. 16 hours you spent at the cotton mill, breathing dust so thick it turned your spit white. Your lungs burn with each breath, and chemical smells from the dye works have soaked into your clothes, your hair, your skin. This cellar room costs half your weekly wages, but it's the only shelter your family can afford in Manchester's crowded courts. 3 other families share this underground space with you. The O'Brien children cough in the corner, their small bodies racked with the same lung sickness that took their baby sister last winter. Mrs. Walsh tries to quiet her crying infant, but the child's wails echo off the damp stone walls. You remember when your own daughter made those same desperate sounds before the fever claimed her. The court above traps 30 people in spaces meant for 5. You share a single water pump with everyone, and the privy overflows constantly into the same courtyard where children play. The smell mixes with smoke from coal fires and chemical stench that drifts from the river to create an air that tastes of desperation and decay. Your wife lies beside you on the straw mattress, her breathing shallow and quick. She worked the night shift while you took the day, so you barely saw each other, except when you passed at the factory gates. Her hands are stained purple from the dye vats, and burns from acid chemicals mark her forearms like small red coins. The mill foreman pays her less than half what men earn for the same dangerous work. Through the thin walls, you hear the Flanagan family arguing about money. Their oldest son lost 2 fingers in a spinning machine last month, and now he can't work at all. The sound of their desperation mingles with the scurrying of rats and the constant drip of water that seeps through the rotting wooden ceiling. The River Irwell flows just beyond these slum courts, but it no longer carries clean water. Factory owners dump their waste directly into the current, turning it black with coal tar and red with chemical dyes. The smell rises on warm days like a living thing, creeping through windows and under doors to poison every breath. Your son, barely 8 years old, works alongside you in the mill. His small fingers move quickly between the spinning threads, but you see how his shoulders slump with exhaustion by afternoon. Mill dust settles in his young lungs just like yours, and his growth has slowed since he started factory work 2 years ago. At night, he curls against your side and coughs until his small body shakes. The cellar walls weep with moisture that never dries. Everything you own stays damp and begins to rot within weeks. Your clothes, your bedding, the small wooden box where you keep your few precious things, all of it moulds in this underground tomb. The dampness creeps into your bones and makes the aching in your joints worse after each long day at the machines. Above your heads, other families crowd into rooms barely large enough for beds. You hear babies crying through the night, parents whispering desperate plans, and the shuffle of feet as workers leave for early shifts or return from late ones. The sounds blur together into a symphony of exhaustion that follows you into whatever sleep you can steal. Mill owners live in grand houses on the hills outside Manchester, breathing clean air while their workers suffocate in these underground courts. They've discovered that tired, desperate people work harder and complain less. The overseers walk between the machines with sticks, hitting anyone who slows down or stops to rest. Your body bears the marks of industrial progress, like scars from an invisible war. Cotton dust has turned your lungs grey and made breathing a constant struggle. Chemical burns dot your hands and arms from working with caustic dyes. Your hearing fades from years of machine noise so loud it drowns out human voices. back pain from bending over spindles makes every step an effort, but stopping work means your family starves. Other workers in the court share similar wounds. Children with fingers shortened by machinery, women with burns from acid that ate through their skin, men who cough blood from lungs destroyed by metal dust and chemical vapours. These injuries mark the true cost of the cotton that makes Manchester wealthy, paid in human flesh and shortened lives. The darkness in this cellar feels different from the natural night your grandparents knew. This is the darkness of spaces, where light was never meant to reach, where families hide underground because they can't afford to live above ground. You close your eyes and try to imagine clean air, but the stench of the river and the sound of coughing children make such dreams impossible. Yet in this desperate place, something new stirs among the workers. Whispered conversations in mill corners speak of joining together to demand better conditions. Men and women who've lost everything begin to find strength in shared suffering. These first quiet meetings in hidden corners will grow into movements that challenge the mill owner's power. As you finally drift toward exhausted sleep, you wonder if there might be some way to push back against this suffocating darkness. In the distance, beyond the factory smoke and chemical stench, new possibilities are beginning to flicker to life along Manchester's streets. Gas flames flicker to life along the street as evening routines slowly begin to change. The year is 1806, and Manchester has discovered something new: artificial light that pushes back the darkness without candles or oil lamps. You finished your shift at the cotton mill an hour ago, but instead of hurrying home through black streets, you walk slowly beneath these golden flames that dance on tall iron posts. The gas burns steadily, fed by pipes that run underground, like veins carrying light to every corner of the growing city. Your day started before dawn, as always, 16 hours breathing cotton dust and tending spinning machines. But tonight feels different. The amber glow transforms familiar streets into something almost magical. Shadows that once hid dangers now retreat to corners where the gaslight cannot reach. You remember when darkness meant staying indoors after sunset, when criminals and accidents waited in every unlit alley. These warm flames make the evening feel safe for the first time in your adult life. The gas comes from a works built on the edge of town, where coal burns in great iron chambers to create the fuel that flows through miles of buried pipes. You watch the workers dig trenches and lay the metal tubes that carry this new kind of fire. The whole system amazed you. Coal transformed into something that could travel through darkness and emerge as steady light wherever people needed it most. Progress arrives in forms you never expected, changing the rhythm of daily life in ways that feel almost like magic. Shops stay open later now that their windows glow with reliable light. You pass the baker's where people still buy bread at 8 in the evening, long after his ovens would have grown cold in the old days. The blacksmith works his forge until 9, hammer ringing against red-hot iron, while gas flames illuminate his workshop. Children press their faces against shop windows, watching craftsmen work by this steady, artificial sun that never flickers in the wind or dies without warning. Your own family waits at home around their first gas fixture, a simple flame that burns in a glass globe mounted on the kitchen wall. Your wife no longer struggles with smoky candles that drip wax and fill the room with fumes. Your children can read books in the evening without straining their eyes in dim candlelight. The gas flame burns clean and bright, steady as sunlight, but gentle enough for nighttime comfort. You remember the excitement when the gas fitters first connected your home to the underground network. Other working families discover new possibilities in these extended evenings. You see couples walking hand in hand along gaslit streets, enjoying conversations without fear of stumbling in the darkness or meeting unseen dangers. Groups of friends gather outside taverns that stay open later, their faces warm in the amber glow while they share stories and ale. The rigid schedule that once sent everyone indoors at sunset begins to soften as artificial light creates new rhythms of social life. The Mill District transforms in gaslight's gentle radiance. Streets that felt threatening after dark now welcome evening strollers and late workers heading home from extended shifts. You notice how the harsh industrial shadows of daytime soften under these golden flames. The same brick walls and iron gates that looked forbidding in daylight take on a warmer character when gaslight touches their surfaces. Even the constant noise of machinery seems less oppressive when you can see clearly where you walk. Children play games in the gaslit streets, their laughter echoing off buildings while parents watch from doorsteps without worrying about hidden dangers. You remember your own childhood when evening meant immediate retreat indoors, when games ended abruptly, when natural light faded. These children learn different rules that evening can stretch longer, that darkness no longer controls, when families must separate and hide behind locked doors. The gas flames burn regardless of the weather. Rain cannot extinguish them like it would torches. Wind cannot blow them out like candles. Snow cannot bury them like oil lamps left outside. This reliability changes how people think about evening plans and nighttime activities. You no longer cancel social visits because storms might leave you stranded in dangerous darkness. The gaslight creates dependable evening routines that weather cannot disrupt. Workers discover they can have lives beyond factory shifts when artificial light extends the useful day. You attend evening meetings where fellow mill hands discuss forming unions to demand better working conditions. These gatherings happen in gaslit rooms where people can see each other's faces clearly while they plan for better futures. The same light that helps mill owners extend production also gives workers space to organise and dream of change. Your neighbourhood pub becomes a different place in gaslight. Instead of the shadowy cavern where men drank quickly before hurrying home to safety, it transforms into a warm, gathering space where families sometimes come together. You see women joining their husbands for evening meals, children playing quiet games while adults talk over ale and simple food. The amber glow makes everything feel more welcoming and less desperate than the old candlelit corners. The gaslight also reveals how much your city has changed. In the steady illumination, you see details that candlelight or moonlight kept hidden. New buildings rise constantly as more families crowd into Manchester seeking millwork. Streets that seemed familiar in daylight show different faces under artificial light. The gas flames illuminate both progress and problems. Find new shops beside overcrowded tenements, prosperity and poverty existing just steps apart. Walking home under these amber flames, you feel something shifting in Manchester's character. The city that once shut down at sunset now pulses with activity through evening hours. Gas flames mark a boundary between the old world, where darkness ruled the night, and a new world where human ingenuity pushes back against natural limits. Your gas lamp at home welcomes you with a steady light that needs no tending. Unlike candles that demand constant attention, this flame burns reliably while your family gathers for evening conversation. The children look less tired when they can play and read in bright light instead of straining their eyes in flickering candlelight. Your wife hums while she sews, her needle moving surely in the steady radiance that makes close work possible even after sunset. As you prepare for sleep, the gaslight outside your window continues its patient vigil. The flame will burn through the night while your family rests, standing guard against darkness in a way that feels both comforting and revolutionary. Tomorrow will bring the same millwork, but the evening will offer new possibilities created by this amber light that extends the day beyond what nature intended. Yet even as these peaceful gaslit evenings settle into routine, the ground beneath Manchester's streets holds deeper changes stirring, changes that will shake the very foundations where ancient stones still rest. You feel ancient Roman stones tremble as the Great Northern Railway tears through Castlefield. The year is 1830, and Manchester awakens to a new kind of thunder that makes the cotton mills sound gentle by comparison. Steam hammers pound day and night, driving iron supports deep into the earth that has rested undisturbed since Roman legions marched away. You stand in your cottage doorway, the same stones that once formed barracks walls shaking beneath your feet as workers blast through centuries of buried history to make way for the railway line. Your day began with the familiar rhythm of millwork, but ended with something extraordinary. Watching the first passenger train arrive from Liverpool. The locomotive moved like a breathing dragon, steam hissing from its iron belly, while wheels turned faster than any horse could run. People gathered along the railway, cutting to witness this mechanical miracle, their faces lit with wonder and fear as the engine thundered past, pulling carriages full of travellers from distant cities. The railway construction cuts through the heart of old Manchester like a knife through flesh. Workers with pickaxes and shovels uncover Roman foundations that have slept beneath the soil for over 1,000 years. You watch them toss aside carved stones that once formed altars and doorways, treating ancient history like rubble to be cleared away. Steam-powered excavators bite into archaeological layers, mixing Roman coins with medieval pottery and modern brick in piles of discarded earth. Your family can no longer sleep through the night. The construction crews work by torchlight and gaslight, racing to complete sections of track before winter weather makes the work impossible. Steam hammers drive wooden piles into the marshy ground beside the River Medlock, with steady mechanical blows that penetrate every wall and window. Your children wake crying from dreams filled with mechanical monsters. The visual transformation shocks you daily. Iron bridges span across spaces where Roman roads once crossed the river. The railway viaduct rises on brick arches that dwarf the ancient stone foundations beneath them. Workers pour concrete and lay iron rails directly over spots where Roman soldiers once walked their evening patrols. The past disappears under layers of industrial progress, buried beneath the weight of Manchester's racing ambition to connect itself to every corner of Britain. Train whistles now mark time instead of church bells or factory horns. The locomotives announce their arrival and departure with steam-powered voices that carry for miles across the city. You learn to recognise the different sounds, the long blast that means departure, the short bursts that warn of approach, the extended wail that signals emergency stops. These mechanical calls create new rhythms in daily life, interrupting conversations and marking hours with industrial precision. The railway brings Manchester closer to distant places than you ever imagined possible. Letters that once took days to travel between cities now arrive within hours. Goods from London warehouses appear in Manchester shops the same day they leave the capital. People speak of visiting relatives in distant counties as casually as they once discussed trips across town. The world feels both larger and smaller as steam engines compress distances that once seemed impossible to cross. You pull heavy blackout curtains tight as air raid sirens wail across Manchester's darkened streets. The date is December 22nd, 1940, and your city has returned to a darkness deeper than medieval nights. You spent today at the munitions factory, your hands still stained with grease from assembling shell casings that will travel to battlefields you can only imagine. The work was urgent and careful. Everyone knows that lives depend on the precision of tired fingers working 12-hour shifts. Now evening brings a different kind of tension as German bombers cross the North Sea towards cities like yours. Your family gathers in the small front room, checking the blackout one more time before settling in for what might be a long night. The heavy fabric blocks every trace of light that might guide enemy aircraft to their targets. You remember how strange it felt when the blackout first began. Manchester, returning to the kind of darkness your great-grandparents knew, when gaslight and electric bulbs disappeared behind thick curtains and painted windows. The city that once blazed with industrial light now hides like a frightened animal. The siren's wail grows louder, joined by others across the city, until the sound becomes a mechanical howl that drowns out normal conversation. Your children press against your sides, their small faces tight with the fear that has become part of daily life. Other families emerge from their houses carrying blankets, thermos flasks, and small bags with precious belongings. You join the quiet procession, walking toward the underground shelter that the council built beneath the old Victorian railway arches. The shelter smells of damp concrete and unwashed bodies, but it offers safety that your house cannot provide. Families arrange themselves on wooden benches and makeshift beds, claiming small spaces that feel like temporary homes in this underground world. You recognize neighbours from your street, faces that look different in the harsh electric light that barely illuminates the shelter's long tunnel. Mrs. Patterson from the corner house helps organise blankets for elderly residents who struggle with the cold stone seating. Children begin to cry as the distant rumble of aircraft engines drifts through the concrete ceiling above their heads. You know those engines belong to Heinkel and Junkers bombers, carrying tons of high explosive and incendiary bombs toward Manchester's factories and rail yards. The sound grows louder until the shelter shakes slightly with vibrations that travel through rock and steel from explosions somewhere in your city. Each distant thud makes people flinch and hold their loved ones closer. A group of women near the shelter entrance begin singing "Pack Up Your Troubles" in voices that shake slightly but grow stronger as others join in. The familiar melody creates a small island of human warmth in this cold underground space. Children stop crying to listen, and you see some of them trying to remember words they learned from their mothers and teachers. Music becomes a weapon against fear, proving that bombs can destroy buildings but cannot silence the songs that connect people to hope. Mr. Davies, who serves as an air raid precautions warden, moves between families with quiet words of comfort and practical information. His uniform gives him authority, but his gentle manner with frightened children shows the heart of a man who chose to spend dangerous nights helping others instead of hiding with his own family. WVS volunteers distribute cups of weak tea from large thermos containers they carry down the shelter steps. The Women's Voluntary Service ladies organise rest centres and emergency supplies with the same efficiency they once brought to church committees and charity drives. The explosions grow closer, and plaster dust drifts from the ceiling as bomb blasts shake the ground above. You realise the Germans are targeting the railway yards and the munitions factories where you and your neighbours work. Each explosion represents months of your labour, destroyed in seconds, but also means the bombs are falling on empty buildings rather than homes where families sleep. You whisper a prayer of gratitude mixed with worry for the firemen and ARP wardens who work above ground during raids. Hours pass in cycles of distant explosions, nervous conversation, and periods of exhausted quiet when even the children fall asleep despite the hard benches. You share sandwiches with neighbours and listen to whispered stories about relatives serving overseas, about letters that arrive weeks late, about hopes that this war will end before another winter arrives. These intimate conversations in underground darkness create bonds between people who barely spoke to each other before the bombing began. The all-clear siren finally sounds near dawn, its steady tone so different from the rising and falling wail that drove everyone underground. Families gather their belongings and climb the stone steps back into Manchester's morning light. You emerge to find your street intact, though smoke rises from the direction of the city centre where bombs found their targets. Windows in nearby houses show cracks from blast pressure, but your neighbours emerge alive and mostly unhurt. Walking home through streets littered with broken glass and scattered debris, you see Manchester's character revealed in crisis. People check on elderly neighbours before examining their own property damage. Shop owners sweep glass from their doorsteps while planning how to reopen for business. Children play games with pieces of shrapnel they find in gutters, turning the tools of war into toys that help them process experiences too large for young minds to fully understand. Your house welcomes you back with familiar rooms and the simple blessing of walls that still stand intact. As you finally rest in your own bed, you carry the memory of voices singing in underground darkness, of neighbours sharing their last cup of tea, of ordinary people finding extraordinary courage when their city needed it most. These Blitz nights teach Manchester that community grows strongest when tested by shared danger. That rest must sometimes be earned through courage rather than simply claimed at day's end. In the years ahead, this same spirit would guide the city through the careful work of rebuilding what war had broken. Construction cranes reach toward Manchester's sky as your city rebuilds itself with modern ambition. The year is 1965, and dreams made of glass and concrete rise from wartime rubble. You spent today working on the crew building the Arndale Centre, your hard hat protecting you from falling debris as steel beams lift into position. This construction reaches toward the future instead of simply patching wounds from the past. Your breakfast happened in the site canteen, where workers gathered to fuel themselves for another day of building something entirely new. Conversations buzzed with excitement about steady wages and the promise of modern shopping that would rival anything London could offer. You remember the pride in your foreman's voice as he explained how the Arndale would become the largest covered shopping centre in Europe, a place where families could shop in comfort, regardless of Manchester's unpredictable weather. Demolition crews work alongside the builders, tearing down Victorian warehouses and clearing away buildings that survived German bombs but cannot survive the march of progress. You watch them load rubble into trucks, carrying away bricks that once housed cotton merchants and shipping clerks. Each demolished building makes space for something sleeker, more efficient, designed for modern families who will live and work in this transformed Manchester. New crescents rise in districts where slum courts once trapped families in poverty and disease. You walk past construction sites where modern flats replace the cellars and tenements that killed so many children with damp and overcrowding. The new apartments feature central heating, indoor bathrooms, and windows that actually open to let in fresh air. You think about your own family, still living in a Victorian terrace, and wonder if you'll qualify for one of these bright new homes that promise comfort your grandparents could never have imagined. Clean lines replace the ornate stonework that Victorian architects carved with such careful detail. Glass walls reflect sky and clouds instead of the soot-darkened brick that marked the industrial age. Open plazas create spaces for people to gather and rest, replacing the narrow courts where families once lived, pressed together without privacy or light. You notice how different the city sounds in these new spaces, your footsteps echoing off smooth surfaces instead of being absorbed by old stone and mortar. Other construction workers share your cautious optimism about these changes. During lunch breaks, you sit on concrete blocks and discuss whether progress always requires erasing what came before. Jimmy, who worked on railway maintenance before joining construction, talks about the Roman stones they discovered while digging foundations for the new tower blocks. The ancient carved pieces went to museums instead of being built into the new structures, preserved behind glass rather than remaining part of the living city. Families begin moving into the completed sections of housing estates, carrying cardboard boxes and furniture into homes that smell of fresh paint and new carpeting. You watch children explore playgrounds with modern equipment, their voices echoing across courtyards designed by architects who studied how space affects human behaviour. These children will grow up with amenities their parents never experienced: reliable hot water, electric heating that responds to thermostats, neighbours who live behind solid walls instead of thin partitions that carry every sound. The transition creates unexpected losses alongside obvious gains. Mrs. Henderson, whose family has lived on Coronation Street for 3 generations, tells you about the loneliness she feels in her new flat with its thick walls and efficient heating. She misses the constant presence of neighbours, the way conversations happened through windows and over back garden fences. Her new home offers privacy and comfort, but it also provides isolation that her old overcrowded street never allowed. Evening routines change in these modern spaces. Families disappear behind their own front doors instead of gathering in shared courtyards or on front steps, where everyone's business became community knowledge. Children play in designated areas with safe equipment, but they lose the freedom to roam through connected streets where every adult feels responsible for every child's safety. The new shopping centres create gathering spaces that feel different from the organic community centres that grew naturally in older neighbourhoods. The Arndale Centre offers clean, climate-controlled shopping that protects families from Manchester's rain and cold, but the echoing halls lack the intimate scale of corner shops, where merchants knew every customer's preferences and family circumstances. You appreciate the efficiency and choice, but sometimes miss the personal connections that made commercial transactions feel like social visits. Manchester's skyline transforms as tower blocks rise beside remaining Victorian churches and Georgian terraces. The contrast creates visual tension between architectural eras, each representing different assumptions about how people should live together. You stand on the construction scaffold and see the whole city spread below you, old and new, existing in uneasy partnership as the metropolitan area expands beyond its historic boundaries. Working families discover that modern conveniences come with modern costs. Rent in the new flats exceeds what many can afford, pushing some toward housing estates on the city's edges, where commuting becomes part of daily routine. You notice how prosperity flows unevenly through the reconstruction, benefiting some neighbourhoods while leaving others waiting for improvements that always seem scheduled for next year's budget. As evening falls over the construction sites, you walk home through streets where gaslight once created the first artificial extension of natural day. Now electric streetlights illuminate broader roads designed for increased car traffic, their harsh brightness replacing the warm, amber glow that softened Victorian shadows. The light reaches further and burns more reliably, but it also eliminates the gentle transitions between day and night that helped earlier generations settle into natural rhythms of rest. Your own family gathers around the television set that brings distant events into your front room, connecting your household to national conversations about social change and cultural transformation. The same technology that enables modern communication also changes how families spend their evening hours, creating shared entertainment that sometimes replaces the individual conversations and local stories that once filled the time between work and sleep. Manchester learns that modernisation requires balancing efficiency with human connection, progress with preservation, individual comforts with community bonds. The city's industrial buildings stand empty now, their massive brick walls and iron frameworks waiting silently in the shadows between the gleaming new developments. These abandoned spaces hold their own possibilities, ready for young voices to discover what new life might grow within their weathered walls. Young voices discover what possibilities wait inside these weathered walls. You feel bass lines pulse through your chest as the Hacienda transforms an old warehouse into Manchester's beating heart. The year is 1988, and you spent your day stacking shelves at the supermarket or filing papers in some grey office. But now evening opens a door to something entirely different. You walk through streets lined with empty cotton mills and abandoned railway arches, past buildings that once housed the machinery of Victorian industry. These same structures that your grandparents knew as places of exhausting labour have become spaces where young people gather to create something the older generation cannot understand. The queue outside the club stretches around the corner, filled with faces that carry the restless energy of a generation seeking its own voice. You remember the excitement building throughout your workday as Friday afternoon crept toward evening. Your job pays enough to cover rent and food, but it offers nothing for your spirit. The warehouse parties promise something different, a place where the repetitive rhythms of industrial work give way to the hypnotic beats that make bodies move as one living thing. Inside the converted space, strobing lights cut through darkness, thick with anticipation and sweat. The sound system thunders with frequencies that seem to vibrate through the old brick walls and into your bones. You recognize the building's history in its iron columns and arched windows. But tonight those Victorian bones support something entirely new. Young people from across Manchester's neighbourhoods gather here, united by music that transforms abandoned industrial space into a cathedral of sound and movement. The DJ booth stands where factory supervisors once watched over rows of spinning machines. Now different hands control the rhythm that governs this space, mixing records that blend electronic beats with guitar sounds from bands like the Stone Roses and the Happy Mondays. These Manchester groups create music in old cotton mills and converted warehouses, using the acoustics of industrial architecture to shape sounds that feel both futuristic and rooted in the city's working-class character. You dance until your clothes stick to your skin and your feet ache in ways that feel different from the exhaustion of regular work. This tiredness comes from choice rather than necessity, from moving your body to rhythms that speak to something deeper than daily survival. The warehouse fills with young people who spend their daylight hours in shops, offices and factories, but who claim these nighttime spaces as their own territory for expression and connection. Other dancers move around you in the strobing light, their faces showing the same release you feel. Manchester's youth, who grew up hearing stories about the Blitz and post-war rebuilding, now create their own culture. In the shells of buildings their parents and grandparents once knew as places of hard labour. The irony is not lost on anyone. Spaces that once trapped workers in dangerous, poorly paid jobs now offer freedom and community to their children and grandchildren. The music continues until dawn breaks over Manchester's skyline, painting light across the windows of mills and warehouses that stand empty during daylight hours. You and hundreds of others emerge from underground spaces and converted buildings, blinking in morning light that reveals a city most people never see. The same streets that bustle with commuters and shoppers during business hours transform at night into pathways between venues where creativity blooms in abandoned industrial spaces. Groups of friends walk together through quiet morning streets, still energized by hours of dancing, but also tired in the deep, satisfied way that comes from physical expression. You notice how the music has created temporary communities among strangers, how shared movement and rhythm build connections that span different neighbourhoods and backgrounds. The warehouse parties prove that young people can find ways to claim space and create meaning even in a city that offers them mostly low-wage service jobs and uncertain futures. The contrast between daylight Manchester and nighttime Manchester grows sharper as this music scene develops. During business hours, many of these warehouse spaces sit empty, their owners unsure how to make them profitable in a post-industrial economy. But at night, they fill with energy that proves creative culture can breathe life into spaces that economic planners have written off as obsolete. Young entrepreneurs organise parties in buildings that developers cannot yet imagine converting into offices or apartments. Sunday morning finds you walking home through streets where normal life prepares to resume. The sounds of church bells and early commuter traffic replace the electronic beats that governed your movements for hours Your body carries the memory of bass lines that travelled through floorboards and up through your legs, rhythms that connected you to something larger than individual experience. These warehouse gatherings create rituals of rest and renewal that feel both ancient and completely modern. The music scene grows around bands who understand that Manchester's industrial heritage can be transformed rather than simply abandoned. They record in old mills and practice in converted railway arches, using the natural reverb of brick and steel to create sounds that could only come from this particular city. Their songs capture the energy of young people who refuse to accept that their hometown's best days lie in the past. Local newspapers begin writing about the scene, trying to explain to older readers why their children spend weekend nights in abandoned buildings listening to music that sounds like machinery, given rhythm and melody. Parents who remember when these same spaces represented economic opportunity and steady employment struggle to understand why young people seek them out for pleasure, rather than avoiding them as symbols of a disappearing way of life. As you finally reach home and prepare for sleep, your ears still ring with electronic beats that seem to echo the industrial rhythms that once governed this city. The warehouse parties teach Manchester youth that creativity can bloom anywhere. That community forms around shared experience rather than shared background, that the future might be built from the bones of the past rather than in opposition to it. You drift towards sleep with bass lines still pulsing gently through your chest, carrying the promise that tomorrow night might bring new sounds and new connections. But these cultural foundations would soon support transformations that reached even higher as Manchester prepared to build its future with materials both ancient and entirely new. Construction cranes reach toward the sky as glass towers rise from foundations that remember Roman footsteps. You stand beneath Deansgate Square's gleaming towers as rain falls on both new glass and ancient stone. The workday ended an hour ago in your office on the 32nd floor, where you spent 8 hours managing digital projects that connect Manchester businesses to clients across the globe. Through your floor-to-ceiling windows, you watch the city spread below like a living map of its own history. Glass towers reflect Victorian warehouses, while medieval street patterns thread between modern developments. Your morning began in a converted warehouse apartment in the northern quarter, where exposed brick walls mix with modern fixtures in ways that honour both past and present. The building once housed cotton spindles and weaving looms, but now it shelters young professionals who work in digital media and creative industries. You made coffee in a kitchen that overlooks Piccadilly Gardens, where Roman roads once crossed and Victorian railway passengers once hurried toward distant destinations. The continuity strikes you daily. People still gather, still travel, still build their lives around the same geographical advantages that made this place important centuries ago. The preservation efforts create fascinating juxtapositions throughout your daily routine. You walk to work past medieval Chetham's Library, where Karl Marx once studied capitalism, while sitting beside windows that overlook cotton mills. The building survived bombing, urban renewal, and economic changes that erased most of its contemporary structures. Now it sits surrounded by glass office towers and converted loft apartments, its ancient stones providing anchor points for a city that rebuilds itself every generation while keeping selected pieces of its layered past. Modern residents navigate between historical consciousness and contemporary convenience with practiced ease. You buy groceries at Marks and Spencer, built on the site of medieval market stalls, then walk home through Castlefield, where Roman fort walls rise beside luxury apartment complexes. The developers discovered they could charge premium rents for homes that offered views of authentic archaeological remains. History becomes a selling point rather than an obstacle, proof that progress can incorporate rather than simply replace what came before. The evening commute reveals how transportation layers accumulate like geological strata. You descend into Metrolink stations built beside Victorian railway tunnels that burrow through Roman settlement sites. Modern trams follow routes that echo ancient paths between river crossings and hilltop settlements. The same geographical logic that guided Roman engineers influences contemporary urban planners. Though electric trains now carry passengers along corridors where legions once marched and medieval merchants once travelled with pack animals. Construction cranes dot the skyline like mechanical birds, constantly reshaping Manchester's profile, while architects balance innovation with preservation requirements. You watch new towers rise beside buildings that survive the Blitz and urban renewal programs. Planning committees debate every major development, weighing economic opportunity against historical significance. The negotiations create compromises that sometimes satisfy no one completely, but allow the city to grow without entirely erasing its accumulated character. Student areas blend multiple eras as young people from around the world make temporary homes in buildings that span centuries of architectural styles. You see them gathering in Victorian pubs that serve craft beer to customers who study on laptops powered by wireless networks. The University of Manchester occupies Gothic Revival buildings beside modern research facilities, creating campuses where cutting-edge science happens in settings that honour traditional academic atmosphere. The restaurant scene reflects this cultural layering as global cuisines establish themselves in converted Victorian commercial buildings. You meet friends for dinner in a former textile warehouse that now houses restaurants serving food from continents that Manchester's cotton trade once connected through imperial networks. The irony feels appropriate. Spaces that once facilitated global commerce through industrial exploitation now celebrate international culture through voluntary exchange and creative fusion. Weekend markets operate in squares where similar gatherings have happened for centuries, though the goods reflect contemporary abundance rather than subsistence necessity. You browse stalls selling organic vegetables, artisanal crafts, and ethnic foods that would have amazed medieval Manchester residents. The social function remains consistent even as the economic context transforms. People still gather to trade, to see neighbours, to participate in community life that extends beyond individual households. Evening entertainment reveals how cultural venues adapt historic buildings for contemporary purposes. You attend concerts in converted churches, art exhibitions in former industrial spaces, and theatre performances in buildings that began as music halls during Manchester's Victorian heyday. The Bridgewater Hall brings classical music to audiences in a purpose-built venue that honours acoustic principles while embracing architectural modernism. The night skyline tells Manchester's story in illuminated layers. LED lights outline contemporary towers, while floodlights highlight Victorian civic buildings and medieval churches. The Beetham Tower's beacon sweeps across neighbourhoods where gaslight once marked the first victory over natural darkness. Electric illumination reveals the city's architectural timeline, showing how each generation added its own interpretation of what urban life should look like. Your apartment building's lobby displays archaeological fragments discovered during construction, Roman coins and medieval pottery arranged behind glass like evidence in an ongoing investigation of human persistence. These artifacts remind residents that their contemporary lives add another layer to stories that began long before anyone could imagine the city of Manchester would become. Walking home through these layered streets, you feel how every footstep connects you to the countless others who found their way along these same paths. The pavement beneath your feet covers Roman stones, medieval foundations, Victorian sewers, and modern utilities, each layer supporting the next in an unbroken chain of human settlement. Tonight's rest continues an ancient pattern of people finding shelter and community in this river crossing, but above all these changes, one constant element has witnessed every transformation across the centuries. The same water that has fallen here for millennia touches your face as you stand in the northern quarter tonight. Raindrops that once struck Roman leather and medieval thatch now fall on modern glass and ancient stone with equal gentleness. This rain witnessed torches flickering in Mamucium fort, candles guttering in medieval cottages, and gaslight dancing on Victorian streets. It drummed against blackout curtains during the Blitz and washed the dust from warehouse raves at dawn. Manchester's constant rain connects every generation through shared sensation, proving that, while cities transform completely, some experiences remain eternal and unchanged across centuries. Thank you for drifting through the night with me. If you found comfort here, tap subscribe and like the video. It helps others find a place to rest too.